Hello, my beautiful souls. My name is Nicole, and I am here to help you reconnect with your light. It's been some time since I posted, and I apologize for those of you who've been waiting for this latest video. Things have been somewhat intense, just trying to figure out how I feel since the shift that took place on the 21st of December. I've certainly been feeling the energies and the shift that has taken place. But today I would like to talk about how it is that our thoughts create our reality. We don't realize how much of an impact our thoughts have in creating the world that we live in on a day-to-day basis. We don't realize just how powerful our thoughts really are. In my previous videos, I talked about how everything is in fact energy, and how our emotions are what affect the vibrational frequency at which we vibrate. But our thoughts also have a great way of impacting our vibrational frequency. And it is so important to be more thoughtful about the thoughts that we have in our mind. And whilst this might seem a little bit impossible because the mind is a thinking machine and the mind thinks continuously, always thinking about something or the other. But why is it so important to cultivate the way that we think? Because our thoughts actually have the power to create the reality in which we live. And what do I mean by that? I'll give you an example. If I'm constantly thinking that everybody in the world is out to harm me, then that is all that I will see. Every time I come across a person who might be acting what I think is shady, I might start to believe, oh, this person wants something from me. And where did that thought come from? Well, our thoughts come from everything that we experience in life, all the information that we're taking in, even the information that we don't necessarily remember. And this is where predictive programming comes into play, because all of the content, we live in the world of information. We live in the age of information, should I say rather. And what that means is we are constantly being bombarded by information. And the problem with that is it's nowadays becoming very, very difficult to discern what is real versus what is fake. And that's where intuition is important and discernment is important, because remember, there is no one universal truth. Truth is subjective because we have all had individual experiences. Something that rings true for me might not ring true for you, but the only reason it rings true for me is because of perhaps a certain set of experiences that I went through that makes me believe that this situation could be true. Whereas you, on the other hand, might have experienced life in a completely different way and automatically know, this is not my truth. But we always talk about the truth. What is true? What isn't true? But the thing is, the truth is always subjective. And if we spent less time focusing on what everybody else is doing and focusing more on what's going on within ourselves, then perhaps we would also be very different people. So coming back to our thoughts, if I constantly think, I am a fat potato, for example, something that I believed for a very long time. I had a lot of issues. I had a lot of self-image issues. I was very uncomfortable with who I was. And I constantly used to think, oh, I'm so fat. Oh, I'm so unattractive. Oh, this and oh, that. And eventually, that is what you begin to see. I'm sure most of you have heard of the term self-fulfilling prophecy. And a self-fulfilling prophecy is very true even towards ourselves. If we constantly believe, and this is why the self-talk in our mind is the most important above all else. If you are constantly telling yourself, oh, I am a failure. Oh, I will never succeed. Oh, things never go my way. Eventually, you start to believe that. And if you recall from the previous video I posted, our beliefs create our reality. Because what we believe, we see. Coming back, I'll include a link to the previous video that I'm talking about, because I think that you will find that helpful to watch that video before continuing on with this one. because it's important to understand that everything is energy. And what I mean by everything is energy is simply everything is made up of a certain vibrational frequency, including us. And the vibrational frequency that controls the way we think is purely based on the content that we are taking in and the experiences that we have endured. So, the cell, coming back to self-fulfilling prophecy, look at it this way. If you think about it in the sense that when you are in a bad mood and somebody who knows you very well, even before you even say something, that person will say, hey, what's going on with you? You seem like you're in a bad mood. And you won't even have had to open your mouth, but yet that person will already know. Why? Because they can feel the difference in energy. Our emotions are what create the vibrational frequency at which we vibrate. But our emotions and our thoughts together is where the catalyst begins. Because you can have emotions. I mean, you can say, hey, I'm feeling glum, or hey, I'm feeling happy. And think about it this way. Depending on the emotions that we're feeling, we make very different decisions in the world. But again, I urge you to go back to that other video because I think you'll find it very helpful. But now our thoughts, when we attach emotions to our thoughts, I mean, the brain is a thinking machine. Thoughts are always happening. And we think that we cannot control our thoughts, but we can. And this is what meditation is about. This is what mindfulness is about. I'm sure many of you have heard about the law of attraction. And while some of us may think it's a little bit mumbo jumbo, it is to a certain extent if we don't fully comprehend the way it works. And the way it works is by cultivating the way we think. And now that's easier said than done, because somebody who has experienced a lot of trauma may find it very difficult to see the world in a different way. Somebody who has been rejected continuously, time after time, by everybody around them, how do they create the belief that they will ever be accepted by anybody? It's so hard to create a new set of beliefs and a new set of thoughts based on the emotions that we have felt and the experiences that we have endured. But remember, we are not our stories. We are not our emotions. The stories that we tell ourselves are purely a coping mechanism to help us get through whatever it is that we are feeling. But by learning to really feel our emotions rather than trying to negate them, then nothing really moves forward. And the spiritual community, or whatever you want to call it, whilst they always talk about, oh yes, it's all about love and light and positivity, this is true to a certain extent, but not really, because we all experience negative. We all live in a world of duality where one cannot exist without the other. Think of it this way. Light cannot exist without darkness. Happiness cannot exist without sadness. Love cannot exist without despair. Because how can we know what one is if we haven't experienced the other? And this is why negative emotions and negative feelings, they exist to help us grow. They exist to help us expand. They exist to help us understand where things are not working in our favor, where we need to move forward in a different way. So if we are constantly thinking, oh, everyone is always against me, why is everything always happening to me? Nothing ever works out in my favor. Because everything is energy, eventually that is what will happen, because you believe it. And remember, what we believe is what we create. This is what I talked about in the previous video about limiting beliefs, about how if we are told money doesn't grow on trees, we begin to believe that money doesn't grow on trees. And whilst in the physical sense money doesn't grow on trees, creating more abundance is very easy if we believe that it's possible. And this is where unworthiness becomes the biggest problem. Most of us have grown up believing that we are unworthy. And why have we grown up as such? Because society conditions us this way. And this goes on for generation after generation after generation, that if you don't know it's happening, you don't even know it's there. So if we have been taught to believe that we are not good people, that we don't know what we are talking about because the education system, because if we think a little bit differently to the way the education system creates us to be, then we start to believe that we are unworthy. Most of us have grown up in a household where we don't truly understand the meaning of unconditional love. And unconditional love is very hard for an individual because it means that you must love somebody despite how that person makes you feel. Think about it this way. If you have siblings and you may have had some pretty big fights with your siblings, but somehow you always knew that something would be repaired, that no matter how bad the fight was, you would always become friends again. And that is the true meaning of unconditional love. Loving somebody despite or in spite of what you might see as being their flaws. I mean, I know that I'm an extremely big chatterbox. And one of the things that my father would repeat to me all the time was, when I was growing up, was stop talking, stop talking, stop talking. And whilst that might not seem like such a big deal, hearing somebody tell you that time and time again over time, you start to believe that nothing you have to say is of value to anybody. And that is one of the limiting beliefs that I needed to come through. And creating this YouTube channel was one of my ways of breaking through those beliefs. Believing that what I have to say, there are people out there who want to hear it. And so really the thoughts that we have in our mind continuously create our reality. I really began to think that I was worthless, that nobody wanted to hear anything I have to say. That even so far as to believe that when people would say, oh wow, you know, what you say is so interesting, I would question, really? Do people really care about what I have to say? And so our thoughts, they really do create our reality. It's so important to cultivate the way that you think, to cultivate the self-talk that you have towards yourself. If you're constantly saying, oh no, you're never going to achieve that, you're never going to accomplish that, who am I to make a change? If we believe that we can't accomplish anything, then where would the world be today? Fortunately enough, there have been people out there who, despite all odds, despite everyone going against them and saying they were crazy, they persevered and they kept on thinking, you know what? I am going to find out a way to show that what I think is true to the world. So it's so important to cultivate our thoughts. And that self-fulfilling prophecy is so important because think about it this way. When you approach a conversation with anger within you, other people will feel that anger and they will reflect that anger back to you. Think about it this way. When you approach people with love and kindness and happiness, people feel that happiness. Think about it when you laugh. I'm sure you've had a situation where you might have been laughing and suddenly a fit of giggles might have taken over you and you didn't even know why you were laughing anymore. But everybody else in the room starts laughing just because you were laughing. It's infectious. But just how your happiness and laughter can be infectious, your bad moods and low self-esteem can also be infectious. Because everything is about perspective. Everything is about the way we think. If we think the world is a shitty place, then we only see the world as being a shitty place. But when we decide to open our eyes to the beauty that surrounds us all, we begin to see the beauty all around us. We have been forced to believe that things can only be a certain way. For example, we believe that beauty, the way society has ingrained us to see only beauty from the outside. But what about the beauty that lives within each and every one of us? What about all of the kind things that we have done throughout our lives but people cannot see because we have been pushed to believe that beauty is only skin deep, whereas beauty lies so much further than what we can see. Beauty is all the kind things that we do for one another just because we can. The kindness that you can have in building people up instead of tearing them down. So my beautiful souls, I urge you to question your way of thinking. How have you been thinking about yourself? How have you been thinking about the world? How can you change the way you think so you can change the way you see the world? How can you start to believe and see yourself as a different person to what everybody else said that you were? How can you start thinking about all the good things that you can accomplish as opposed to always focusing on all the things that you will not? So my beautiful souls, I want to keep this short. I send you so much love and light as you think about how the world affects you and how your thoughts affect you. Love and light.